Welcome to session 2 of our 5-day masterclass. So just jumping on and waiting for technology to click in. If this is the first time you are joining us and you haven't seen the first session, after this particular session is finished, I'll go back and share the link. I'm sharing this across a number of different platforms, so I'll make sure that I'll go back on the platform that you're watching and link to the first session. But in the first session, you'll want to go back and listen and watch that, because we talked about some common money, mindset, and marketing mistakes that stops business owners, particularly if you're a service-based business owner. So you run a business where you're selling your expertise to your clients and helping them achieve an outcome that they're struggling to achieve. So through leveraging your expertise, leveraging your experience and knowledge, they're able to find a solution to their problems. And so every single session that I'm sharing over the next 5 days it follows on from the previous one. So today's session, we're talking about or focusing on a money boost. And that is the system and the model that'll take you from underpaid commodity to highly paid authority. If you would like to leave a comment or a question, by all means, go ahead and do that. I do have the facility to check through some of the comments as I'm going through today's training. But if you're watching the replay, then I'll always go back and answer any other questions that you may have. So let me just go ahead and share one more link before we get started. And that is especially if you have not downloaded the Take Action Guide. I always love to create little resources like that with any training that I do, so that you can take down your own notes and go back later and start to implement and take action. And to do that, all you need to do is go to annemariecross.com/5-day masterclass, and you'll be able to access that work guide. And if you're not yet part of our community of change makers and aspiring thought leaders over on Facebook, all you need to do is go to bit.ly/pod tribe with a capital P, capital T. There's some awesome people in that group up to amazing things. We continue conversations. I do weekly trainings and will continue to do that. And of course, we've got this particular training, which I'm streaming live across different platforms. All right, let's dive in. So today, as I mentioned, we're talking about the money boost. And when I'm speaking to clients who are looking to really position themselves as that thought leader, that authority in their field, it becomes very difficult for them to do so if they are not doing what I'm going to be sharing today. And so if you recognize that you perhaps haven't really gone to the length of implementing the things that I'll be sharing today, don't let that be something that beats yourself up, but rather look at it as an opportunity for growth, something that you want to work on. And in actual fact, we're towards the end of the year. If you can start getting into action and implementing some of these things, it means that you can start 2020 off hitting the ground running. I'm a firm believer in how you finish the year will pretty much determine how you start next year. And so it's really good to do a bit of a check-in. For some of us, who has got these things in place already, you may be reflecting on some of the projects and some of the things you've launched this year, and then considering, what do I want to do next year? Do I need to evolve that program? Do I need to change it up? Do I need to implement some things? Because I'm recognizing that my ideal clients, their behavior has changed as far as the way that they're wanting to absorb and engage with content, consume content. I recently did that, and I answered a question in the previous session where someone asked, how do you know what program to launch and when you're ready to launch? And as I said to her, well, your audience are the best indicators and the best people to tap into to see what it is that they need. And that is also in the delivery of your content. And I've got some online programs, but I recognize that people get stuck because of the mindset barriers that I mentioned yesterday about self-doubt, not thinking that they could do it, discrimination where they put the bar so high. Perfectionism can be a crippling effect on our business if we don't if we're not out there launching and if we're not out there sharing content. And so, of course, what I said to her was I asked my community, and I could see that people were getting stuck. So now what we're doing is we're relaunching, and I'm actually going through with them in a group coaching program. This is my podcasting with purpose. So I share that because some of you may be going through some of the things that you did launch this year and you're disappointed with the results. All right, so maybe the results weren't quite there yet, but this is just the next step to determining what can I do differently? Do I need to implement? Do I need to provide different solutions? Do I maybe need to work through people and offer it in a group coaching program to be able to get better buy-in and better uptake? So just answering that, if you are quite disappointed, don't let that be something that you turn away and go, well, that failed, not going to do that anymore. Have an opportunity to look and see what is working. Now, one of the things that may not be working is that you're making common mistake number one, and that is charging by the hour. When we charge by the hour, there are a number of different things that can occur from the viewpoint of your ideal customer. And this happened to me decades ago when I was in the career industry and still working on an hourly basis. Or if I was resume writing, still offering services from a resume to resume. What happens is when you charge by the hour and you're sharing with someone your hourly rate, they then compare you to other people in your industry that are also charging an hourly rate. And they're basing their decision on the hourly rate. They're also basing the decision on their own mindset and what they believe is worth it or not. And there's a whole lot of different aspects that you don't want them to be looking at your services through their filter of the prospect that you're just a commodity. And so they don't take into account the years of experience that you've had, the qualifications that you've had, the challenges that you have overcome. And often as entrepreneurs and business owners, we're in a field and able to share expertise because we've gone through that journey before them. We've identified the steps, we've identified the shortcuts, we've identified what is going to help them be successful because you've walked that journey before them, and a whole lot of other different things. And when you package that up, there is no way that someone can understand the value and the in-depth experience that you bring to the table through just stating an hourly rate. And I'm sure you've had or heard an analogy of, we're just going to say it's a mechanic, and someone comes into his workshop and says, look, I've got an issue with my car. Can you fix it for me? So the mechanic says, will you start the car? And he listens and he hears the car spluttering. He goes to his workbench, he picks up a tool, leans under over the, in the bonnet and hits something, and all of a sudden the car runs perfectly. And he says to the client, well, you owe me this much. And the client goes, that much? You were only under there for 5 or 10 minutes. And the mechanic says, yeah, but it took me 20 years to know exactly where to find, what to listen for, what tool I needed, and where to hit. And that analogy is a bit of a funny one, but you get the understanding of, it might take you 5 or 10 minutes, but to do that, it's taken you 20 years to get there. And you cannot possibly, showcase that value if you're just charging an hourly rate. So please don't charge hourly rates. What you do need to start to do is to look at putting together packages, putting together different programs, and creating your IP, which is your intellectual property. So what is your intellectual property? Well, I've hinted at it already. Your intellectual property can be garnered and developed from your experience, which can be paid and unpaid too. I remember years ago when I was working with mothers returning to the workforce, and a number of them had been out of the workforce because they've had children. And, they would come to me and they'd say, well, look, I need to get my resume done, yet I'm really embarrassed because I haven't got much to put on it. I've been, at home with taking care of the family. And I love those conversations because so often we negate and we take for granted the experience that we've had. So what I did was obviously ask them, well, what sort of things were you doing? And many of, us as mums, I mean, I know when I was looking after my children at home, I was also involved in the local kindergarten and a lot of different voluntary things. But through that capacity, I was still able to keep tapped into technology, still keep tapped into, committee. There's a lot of different transferable skills that are relevant and valuable. It's in how you put them onto that document. And I'm sharing this because there may be some experience that you've had that you're neglecting, that you're not identifying key components that you can then transfer to the work that you're doing now. And it will really showcase a deeper level of experience and knowledge that you can, and insights that you can share with your clients. So think about experience, paid and unpaid. If you're not able to demonstrate relevancy, and I call that cross-mapping across industries, industry cross-mapping. Have a look at what you've done and look at those transferable skills. We also do industry cross-mapping too if we're looking to really position ourselves ahead of our competitors and really innovate by looking at what other industries are doing and seeing, can I adapt and adopt that into what I am doing? Hey, Dexter, good to see you here. And so experience, knowledge is definitely something else that you want to identify. Now, remember, the knowledge and experience, unpaid or paid, that you're looking at needs to be relevant to the role that you are applying for, or not applying for, but obviously putting together in your packages. I had my career coach's hat on then. So your knowledge, insights. I love these three things. Insight, so these are tips, strategies that you teach. Hindsight, what you would do differently. You'll often hear me talk about that. It's actually the structure that I use when I'm developing podcasts. Hindsight is such a wonderful teacher. Things that you learned, things that you would do differently, things that you wouldn't do anymore because through hindsight that was a waste of time or it's no longer relevant. And then foresight. With the experience that you've had and also looking at behavior, over the years, what are you able to harness from that? And knowing what you now know to be able to foresee changes happening in the marketplace so that you can help your ideal clients position themselves to ride the wave of change or whatever that is. So you look across, that knowledge across in those three lenses: insight, hindsight, and foresight. And then last but not least, one of the things that you want to identify are the studies. Now, this does not necessarily mean university degree. In fact, I remember speaking to an organization who was in the IT field, and they would say, sadly, that any of the interns that would come through IT, through university, they would say, everything that you've learned, fantastic, but don't bring any of that into the workplace. Now we're actually going to show you how to do things and how we do things from a practical level in the workplace. Not that I'm poo-pooing education from that sense, but, so often we neglect to include the things that we've learned on the job, courses, studies, reading. You could be an avid reader of journals within your particular industry that you now are positioning yourself as that thought leader. And, don't forget to include that because that's relevant to your industry. I mean, one of the things that I'm doing now and I'm really loving is tapping into the latest research done on neuroscience and how sound, our voice and music can create an experience that deepens the level of engagement. It influences far greater. So that's an area that I'm now going to be sharing with clients because of the fact that they can tap into that audio and also their voice to influence people. And then, so what are you doing that's quite different and unique that you can integrate within your packages, within your programs, and within your services? So those are the things that you want to start writing in your action guide. So the culmination of experience, paid and unpaid, your knowledge, which is your insights, your hindsight and foresight, and then the studies. Okay, so if I have a look now, I don't think this is going to come up very well, but one of the next steps that I am going to take you through is coming up with your signature system. Now, this is a term that I learned from one of my mentors when I went through her training program decades ago. And your signature system really is the steps that you take your clients through to get them from A, where they're stuck, to wherever they want to be. So there are a number of different steps that you take your clients through that gets them from where they're stuck to where they're achieving that outcome. Now, for a number of you, you have not really clearly defined that. And again, if you're not clearly defined that, you can't put together programs and packages that are tailored and customized to clients. But also what you may find, one of my clients that I worked with a number of years ago never had that. So she was completely reinventing the wheel for every single client that she was. And it was exhausting because she was reinventing the wheel each time she put a proposal together. And the time that it takes to put proposals together, you may think that it doesn't take a lot of time, but it does. From the time of identifying the client's needs through to putting together the different steps that you're going to take the client through, to putting the proposal together, to typing it out, all those different things. Now, you may have people that are supporting you, but she didn't. So it was very, very time consuming and very, very costly. And then she would get to the end of putting the proposal together and then she would get a no. And unfortunately, that project never went ahead. So what she did was she completely eliminated all of the service offerings that weren't in her core offering. She developed a couple of key programs around that, or offerings. Some she could tailor, of course, but she had her set programs and the different things that she was, by the way, she was an organizer. And so she would go in and help people who perhaps had a death in the family. And all of a sudden there was this huge house that had a lot of different things in it that needed to get sorted, that, so she did that right through to helping people organize the home, organize the office. And she completely reinvented the wheel. So when she focused on some core programs, she cut her time in the preparation and development of her proposals down, but she was able to, now if I can remember correctly, she earned more in 4 months, the following 4 months, than she did for the entire year, the previous year, because she wasn't spinning her wheels. So if you have not developed your signature system, if you don't have a sequence of steps that you take your clients through, I want you to do that and focus on that, because those steps can be branded. You can have that brand name, and that often that is a sub brand which you can patent. That often then gets a reputation for really helping a lot of clients, which means that that's something down the track that you can sell as well. So be mindful of that. So let me just share with you one of the steps, or I call it my, you can't really see it very well here, but you see that's called my podcast profit framework. And it's a framework that I take clients through. You actually have it listed in the work guide, but that's a visual there. Sorry, it's not too big. But you'll see that the steps really are taking my clients from where they feel invisible to influential and profitable. So the first step that I take people through, I'll just list them. The first step is purpose. The second step is plan. The third step is produce. The fourth step is publish. The fifth step is promote. And then the sixth step is profit. Now, so often many people, if they're thinking about developing a podcast, they get into the planning and then the production and then the publishing without really thinking about the purpose, the overall purpose of the entire podcast, because that is going to determine a lot of different things, from the title of your podcast through to your bio, through to the bio, of the podcast itself, to where you want to position yourself. All of these different things come from and through you determining the purpose of your overall podcast and what you want it to support you in achieving. And then, of course, every single episode that you produce needs to have that same planning. What's the purpose of this episode? When you think of the profit, what's going to be my call to action? And that's going to determine the content that you put in your podcast episode through to the key points. Are you going to invite a guest to speak, on that particular podcast to speak into that topic? Or have you help them prepare? Have you got certain questions and angles and case studies that you've given them a heads up that you would like them to share, so that you're adding value in that particular area for your podcast? So I take my clients through every single time and teach this, so that when they go off and create their own podcast, they know exactly what they need to identify and get clear on before they press record. So now it's your turn. I've given you a bit of an overview of just one of my processes, one of my systems, which is that podcast profit framework. So I want you to think about your ideal client. I'm just going to go very quickly through the process. You can always go back and listen to this recording as you're considering what are the steps to my signature system. What are the steps that I take my clients through? Now, firstly, what you need to do, and for those of you taking notes, we're on page 6. What you need to do is think of your ideal client and what they're struggling with. And what a lot of my clients have struggled with previously, and you may be too, is you need to clearly define an outcome that your client is looking for. And if that outcome is not like, I want my client to be more confident. No one, and I'm sorry for some of the transformational coaches there, people want more confidence, but if that's what you're looking at as far as the outcome, you need to dig deeper, because it's going to be very difficult for you to compel that person to become a client if you're just marketing around, well, the outcome is going to be confidence. What is that confidence going to help them achieve? If I think about confidence in the workplace, if I'm working with a career coaching client, well, having more confidence means that they'll show up to the interview and be able to negotiate a higher salary. Confidence would be getting out on stage and being able to present their signature talk and getting leads and inquiries from that signature talk. Getting more confidence will mean being able to showcase their expertise, interview people on their podcast, and really deepen the engagement and know, like, and trust, so people can generate leads and paying clients from their very first podcast episode. So you see, that's all. They're all confident. Their confidence is built, but there's an outcome. So you need to think of that first. And sometimes when you don't do that, you'll find that all of the steps that you map out aren't really getting you to the outcome that you want your clients to get, and let it be one outcome. So the first step is, so you write down the outcome, and this is how I was taught, and I use that a lot with my clients too, and I think it works really well. Write that outcome down on a card and then place it in front of you. A number of steps, obviously you're in a room where you can then take steps forward. So you put that all the way in the distance, not too far, because you don't want it to seem impossible. And then you go right back to the other side of the room, and then you ask yourself, okay, if that's my ideal client's outcome, I'm going to help them achieve that. What is the first step that I need to take to be able to get my clients closer to that outcome? And then write that down on a card and place that in front of you. And then that's the sequence you go through. All right, so now my client knows this. They're able to do this. They've got clarity on this. What is the next step that I need to take my client through? Now, one of the things that you do that works really well is, as you are writing that step down, take a step forward and then just imagine that you are working with your client, or maybe that you are your client. And then, okay, so now I know that. What's the next thing that I need to know? What is the next step in the sequence of my signature system? And then write that down. Now, if you're doing a bit of a brain dump because this is the first time you've done it, that's okay. Just get it down on paper and then in sequence. I would caution you to make it any more than 7 steps. If you've got more than 7 steps, I try and keep that between, 5 is a really good number. Anything too much more than 7 is probably too overwhelming, and it means that you need to chunk it down a little bit more. Does that make sense? Because you might find that you might have a 12-month program, but the 3-month or the 6-month program will take your clients from here to there. But this particular program has these steps. So you need to really discern on that as well, but try not to do more than 7 steps. Otherwise it's too overwhelming. Okay, so now you're up to step 2. Your clients are here. They now know what they didn't know. They've had some great ahas. They're starting to brainstorm. They're getting excited because where they were stuck, you've now supported them. What's the next step? What's the next step that they need to take to be able to get more clarity around the next area, which is going to get them closer to their goal? And that's the steps that you take to be able to get that signature system. If I look back to my profit framework, my podcast profit framework, I knew that we would not go into production or the planning even without knowing the purpose. And I would say that any time that I'm spending with a client, I would spend 80% in purpose and the 20% in the other aspect. The recording, depending obviously how long, if I'm working on a Thought Leader podcast series, that might be half an hour each. So, but we spend a lot more time in purpose, because I know if we don't get that right, all of the other steps are not going to be generating or the right foundations to be able to generate the best results on an ongoing basis. So I knew purpose was really important. Once they understood that, then we can start to plan it. Well, what sort of topics do we need? Can we do some SEO research? What are people searching for? So that when we are looking at being found online, what are the phrases and the terms that our clients are typing for that particular topic? Okay, all right, is it on brand? So the planning will also include what are the topics. Taking your client on a journey, you need to provide context. What's the context around that? How is it going to be valuable? What's the introduction going to be, so that you can hook your ideal clients who are listening to that episode and who maybe not even heard your podcast before? So what's that hook, that introduction? All right, and then you can go into the education around that. How are you going to bring those 3 points for those people who are more auditory and who like to know facts and figures? What are some validating information that you can share in that episode right at the beginning, so that you can pick up on those people who want to know, why am I listening to this? Why is it valuable, and has it been proven? And then the next step would be for the kinesthetic people. What are some hows? What are some insights that I can share? And then at the end of the episode, we look at what next, what's the call to action? How else can they implement? So you deepen the learning, but you also do that in an enticing and compelling way that people are going to make that shift, that take that action, because you've provided them and you've taken them on such a great journey of learning that they feel compelled to take that next step, especially those people who are ready to make that move. That's in the planning stage. It's all planned out. It's all mapped out. You've got a solid framework, so you know exactly what that show is going to entail. And this is really important if you want to position yourself as a thought leader. And there's a difference between just having a podcast if it's just a conversation. If your podcast is just for a conversation because it's more not edutainment, that's one of my colleagues' words, but more like entertainment rather than educating someone, then go for your life. Don't worry about any formatting at all. But if you are using your podcast to become an authority in your field, you want to nurture listeners into leads and paying clients from your very first episode, you need to provide structure, because I don't know about you, but if I'm your ideal client, if you waffle on and ramble, I'm just not going to listen, because I just don't have time to. So, if you're using and leveraging your podcast as that specifically as part of your, customer buyer journey to be able to build know, like, and trust, you have to provide some framework and strategy around capturing someone's attention and maintaining that attention because of the value you provide right through to the finishing moments, even your outro. Then we go into the production, which is the recording, and obviously the editing, mixing, all of that good stuff, then the publishing, then the promoting. And obviously if you've done everything right, it becomes that 24/7, 365 days a year opportunity for you to nurture that listener into that lead. So you can see just me going through that and giving you a bit of example, because I know sometimes examples really bring home the lesson. So I'm hoping that when you're spending some time and mapping out your signature system, that the sequence makes sense, but it's simple. If you feel overwhelmed as you're explaining that, then you need to take it right back, strip it right back. I know sometimes we like to overcomplicate things. I put my hand up, I do, but take out some steps, maybe summarize some steps. There may be some different mini steps in one particular step, but you can put that under, one particular thing that you're working on and that you're focusing on in that step in your signature system. Okay. So this is just, as I said, it is an overview, a heads up on training that I typically will spend quite a bit of time helping my clients figure out. However, I'm sharing that today to giving you a heads up on what you need to do so that if you have not got this in place, you now know what you need to figure out and get clear on. Now, just in case you're asking, why is Anne-Marie talking about this when she does podcasting? Yes. Great question. Glad you asked. The reason is I've spoken to many, many people over the years who've wanted to have a podcast to help them build their reach, build their reputation as an authority, and then ultimately be able to nurture those listeners into leads and paying customers. If you don't have in place what I'm talking and sharing with you over the next 5 days, then it's going to be very hard for you to build a sustainable and scalable business. Because if you're charging by the hour, as we said, which that is a money mistake. If you're charging by the hour and then you don't have packages and programs, how many hours in the week do you have? Now, unless you're one of these people that don't need to sleep, I'm not one of those people. I need my sleep. So then you need to look at creating programs that you can do, group coaching programs. You might create some online resources for those people who may not necessarily yet be in the position to be able to invest in a high level program. So you need to create these different levels of programs and offerings that are value driven, outcome focused, really valuable for your customers, mapped around the signature system, this IP that is now going to be branded, sub-branded, and what you deliver and what you become known for as that particular authority in your field, and your system will be able to do that. In fact, people will often get so excited when you share more about your programs that they think, I need to speak with you. If you've got a room full of your ideal clients and you share more about your program and what you can do, if you've got a room that kind of is silent and going, oh, I need to speak to her, then you know him, then you know you're in the right track. Okay, so here are some considerations with the system that we just, and the steps that we just shared. Things that you need to be clear on. That each step, and again, this is written down on your work guide, each step must have an intention and a mini outcome that is the foundation of the next step. Let me share that again. Each step must have an intention and a mini outcome that is the foundation of the next step. So there's no point going to step C when you haven't done step B clearly. And even if you've got 3 steps in your signature system, that's okay, because you might have some sub-steps, within that. So be very, very clear on the intention. The other thing, each step must be clear, easy to explain, as I mentioned, and understood. If you can't explain it very clearly, then it's going to be very difficult for someone to understand. And as I mentioned, don't have too many steps in your signature system, because that can be overwhelming and confusing. If it's confusing and overwhelming, or seems to be for you, or if you're explaining it to someone, then their eyes kind of glaze over and their head nods off, it's probably overwhelming. So you need to strip it back. And so that's all of those things that I want to share. Common mistake number 1. Then common mistake number 2, and I've hinted at this, and this is not having different programs and packages. Now, don't do what I did many years ago and have so many different packages and programs. People are going, what do I do? Do I do that one, or do I do that one? Do I do that one? Make it simple for people to make an easy decision, an easy yes. Overwhelmed people with too many choices will often say no, because they don't know what the best choice is for them. And I like to have things in 3s. So you might have a DIY, so a do it yourself, which is on an online course. You might then have a done with you and then a done for you option. And if you kind of think about along those lines, then that's going to be a good support for you. But one of the things that you'll want to do, and this is what I recommend to a lot of clients, and I've done this too and been mentored to do it this way, don't create courses yet without really doing some market research first and ensuring that customers will invest in it. There's a difference between going out and asking someone, would you be interested in this? And I see this a lot on social media. Would you be interested in this? And everyone, yes, yes, yes. There's a difference between if you say to someone, would you be interested in this? Here it is. Now go and invest. Oh, yeah, but not for me. So you've got to make sure that people not only say, yes, it's a good program, but if they're your ideal client and they've been struggling with where you can help them with a solution, if they're not going to invest, then you still need to do some more research. So what I did, and I shared this with an example for a question that was asked yesterday on session 1, how do you know when you're ready to launch? Well, one of the things that I did with my podcasting with purpose, this was a number of years ago, this is before I really created any training, I asked my audience, would you be interested? Is this something that you'd be interested in? Because what I didn't want to do was create a course which was very much focused on technology. Because if you followed me for a while, you'll know that one of my sayings is you need to worry about the message before you worry about the make and model of the microphone, because you can't edit and mix compelling content from crap content that no one's going to find valuable, right? So you just can't. You can have the best microphone, but if you haven't got that whole purpose mapped out, valuable content that's specific, that's relevant for your ideal client, then that, $1,000 microphone or however much you've invested won't help. So I didn't want to focus on technology. You can Google that, all the different, and you can go to a technology shop. They'll tell you what technology you'll have. I wanted to focus, with my background being on personal branding and positioning, and then helping monetize your message. That's what I wanted my course to focus on. And so I said to people, would this be of interest? We're not going to focus on technology because, you shouldn't worry about technology. Hire an audio technician to be able to do that for you. But we need to focus on that message and strategy on how that's going to build know, like, and trust, and create a pipeline where you can nurture those listeners into leads and ultimately paying customers. And people said yes. So I said, right. I hadn't created it yet, but I said, this is the program. This is when it's going to start. So if you're interested, here we go. And so I had people that invested in that. And every single week, I still recall this, every single week I was typing up content, sending it to my VA who would develop the PowerPoints, develop the workbooks, and then I would train that. And that's how that particular program developed. And it was great because I went through that program with my clients and I was able to get immediate feedback as to what was helpful, what was beneficial. And, there may have been some things which they had questions around. Every time I did a training, we had an opportunity for Q&A. And some of the things that they asked, I took for granted, because sometimes we take for granted what our clients don't know because of the fact that we've been in our industry for so long. So maybe that's an opportunity for you. Don't completely create and map out and create a whole course. Just create the outline, go and sell that. Get a handful of people. Don't worry if you've only got a few people in that. Celebrate that, because it means that you can provide even more, more time with them. Call it your beta program in your own mind, that you're taking clients through, and then you can ensure that the content is on point, is valuable. They've got some great outcomes at the end of that. And then great, well, this is the program now that I'm going to relaunch, and then do that way. And then, of course, with those particular pieces of content that's based on your signature system, you can then create VIP days. You can create, in actual fact, there is a section here on page 7 with some ideas on what you can create. So grab your pen and paper, and here's some things. You can create a 90-day program. Works really well. As I mentioned earlier, that is what we're now running, our 90-day idea to launch your Thought Leader podcast. So I work through people with it on a 90 days so that we all launch together, or they launch their podcasts. We have a massive celebration, virtual launch of all of their podcasts, and that's done on a 90-day aspect of things. I'm still using the training that I pre-recorded years ago, but the difference is every week we show up for some Q&A, some brainstorming, and helping them where they get stuck. So you might consider a 90-day program. A VIP day, that is where you'll work with a client for a day, that you will, a lot of the times when I'm working with a client on a VIP day, either in person or virtual, There's a lot of content that we go through, a lot of brainstorming, a lot of getting into action. And often they go, phew, I feel like I've run a marathon or 2 or 3 marathons. But that's because we do a lot of work with, with the two of us together, working on them, mapping things out, getting things into action so that they can then continue to implement and roll out what we've worked on through the VIP day. So that could be something that you do well as well. And I love VIP days because sometimes what happens is the clients will then enroll into one of your higher level programs, like a 6-month or maybe even a 12-month program. You can do a 12-month program, a higher level one, maybe a workshop, virtual and in person, or a masterclass. But one of the things that you'll need to consider is just be mindful about what you do launch and what you do choose, because it can sometimes be you can sometimes launch something too soon. You might think that, look, it's great, but a lot of people now have masterminds or the ongoing, month by month. And, if you've only got 1 or 2 people and you're not consistently, adding numbers, that 1 or 2 people, if you're creating content and it's only costing them 27 or 47, that lower end value program can be difficult. So again, have a think about what you want to launch. And then we're nearly at the end. I can sometimes, geek out on all of this. I love sharing all of this. I hope it's valuable for you. Some considerations. These are the things. Avoid creating, let me see, where are we up to? Oh, yes. Avoid creating an online course before you've tested it and brought it to market to see if there's demand and whether someone will pay for it. Mentioned that already, just finalizing this. Take a few people through your program so that you can refine it after you've learned what works and what people have suggested you tweak. And then it's not a set and forget. It's not a set and forget. It can and it probably will change as you continue to monitor client feedback. That's what we continue to do. And remember, every single success story that you create through working with clients will be a testimonial. There you go. There we go. It was a little bit longer than I would have had initially expected. 30 minutes. I'm trying to keep these training to. But my question to you is, after listening and watching today, what is yours when you're putting in your calendar, when you're going to get your signature system created, and what program or package are you going to create first to take to the world? Let me know in the comments and look forward to reading those. If you've got any questions, by all means, please feel free to message or leave a comment. And again, if you have not joined the pod tribe, bit.ly/pod tribe. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about a marketing boost. We're going to talk about must-do strategies to stand out, be heard, and become an industry thought leader. So I'll see you tomorrow, a little bit earlier tomorrow because I've got a virtual summit that I'm part of. So I'll probably see you at about 9 o'clock tomorrow. All right, bye for now.